What if you're a woman attracted to a woman, or a man attracted to a man? What do you give up by living your truth? What do you gain? We're going to be discussing this and much more on today's episode of Raw with Rasha. My guest today is Alicia Virani, a queer woman who struggled to find acceptance from her family years after coming out. Alicia, thank you for being here to share your story and journey with us.
Thanks for having me.
If you could help us understand the difference between being gay and being queer, because I know you identify as queer.
Yeah, so generally people say like gay means, someone who identifies as male who has attraction to someone else who identifies as male, right? So that's sort of how you identify gay, and lesbian is, for cis women, and then queer is a little bit more, can be an umbrella term or just can reflect sort of your approach to attraction, right? Like it's just more fluid. I think it's just personal preference, when I went to college, I was taking a women's studies class and I learned about queer identity, and it was really about the spectrum of sexuality, the spectrum of who we're attracted to, sort of more of a politic of fluidity, and that just really called to me. I was like, yeah, I'm not attracted to people because of their gender. I'm attracted to them because of their personality or who they are, what they want to do with their life, how they interact with me, all those things. And so I just really latched on to that term. And as time has gone on, there's so many other terms have developed. People are identifying in so many ways. But for me, that's the one that feels comforting. And I know that when I meet someone else who identifies as queer, I'm like, okay, those are my people.
As I'm listening to you, what's coming in my head is just identity, that word, and already when we're younger, we're trying to figure out who we are. We get into our teens, into young adulthood. Mm-hmm. So for you, what was the age that you came out?
Yeah, so this sort of process of learning about queer identity, I didn't really know anyone who was gay or queer before I went to college. And so the first person I met was someone who identified as bisexual, and she was South Asian. And I was like, whoa, this is possible. This is a life that's possible, And so it was a slow process throughout college, but probably I started dating my first girlfriend when I was 21. And so it was around that time that I was like, okay, well, this is really who I am, And so I told my mom around that time, and then it took a few more years till I came out to my dad.
So you told mom first?
Yeah, she, how moms always say they have the intuition, so she asked me.
What was her reaction?
She was okay. I think because she had known for a while, she tried to educate herself a little bit more and work through it so that she was okay when she asked me, which was very kind of her to do, not just spew her sadness onto me. So
why do you say spew her sadness? Let's talk about that. That's an important factor.
Yeah, I think, there's this way in which when people come out to their parents, all of a sudden we become the adults or we become the caretakers because they have all of these emotions and feelings that they don't know what to do with, and then all of a sudden it's our role to educate them and to make them feel like it's okay and that we're happy and this is what we have to do to be happy. And so we take on that role and they're just sort of like a mess and turmoil of emotions, So I think, for my dad, that's the way it was. He definitely just had a lot of emotions. But my mom was okay. I mean, she cried because I was crying because it was so scary. It was a scary thing to do. But she was great.
What was scary about it for you? Take me back to that moment. What was that day like? Paint that picture for me.
Yeah. I just... my mom and I had been close, and then I went really far away to college. I went to New York, and I'm from Seattle. And so it was just that distance, and then sort of this self-discovery, right, process. And you don't know how somebody's going to react, or even if it's not bad, it does mean something changes about what they know about you. No one had any inkling about me being queer until I came out, really. It wasn't like other folks who kind of know from an early age or express it from an early age. I wasn't gender nonconforming, I definitely conform to what people consider women look like, right? And so it wasn't obvious for her. And so I just knew that it would represent a shift in relationship, not necessarily a bad one, but it's just change, change is scary.
Did you see any changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always still sort of like, is she really actually happy with the way my life is going? Would she prefer me to have a husband? Things
You're
like
Indian.
that.
You're supposed to be married by now with
Yeah,
3
right.
kids and a house.
Exactly. So, things like that. And I think she always pictured her life a certain way, right? And I'm the oldest. I have a younger sister, and so I'm sure she had lots of ideas about what my life was going to look like. And there are many ways, like in my career and other things, that are not aligned with probably what she might have expected or wanted,
That happens for a lot of us. I want to jump back to Dad.
Yeah.
Because it took you how many years to tell Dad after you told Mom?
Let's see. I think I was about 23 or 24.
So just 2 to 3 years
Yeah.
after you told her.
Yeah.
How did you tell him, and what was your biggest fear in telling him?
I knew that my dad was more religious than my mom. We're Muslim, and my dad has 7 siblings, 6 brothers and 1 sister, and so it's just a very male-dominated side of my family that doesn't really talk about emotions or hard things, right? And so my dad and I had never really talked about anything hard, and my parents are divorced, and he's from Kenya, and so when they got divorced, he moved back to Kenya for a while, and so we just didn't have a close relationship already. So already to say something really vulnerable was scary. But I wrote a letter to him, and my friend had come out to his parents in that way, and it seemed like I wanted to give him time to process it without me being in his face, about it. And my mom was there when he read it, and apparently he was like incredibly upset. He took the pictures of me off of the wall. He said he was going to write me out of his will. Just really, I wasn't there for any of that, but my mom told me, and so.
What did that feel like? Because here you are, you're still his daughter at the end of the day.
Yeah, it was awful. It's so long ago now that it's hard to remember that feeling, but even when I talk about, I don't talk about it very frequently, because we're in a better place. Yeah. But yeah, it wasn't good. It was like he was rejecting me completely from his life. And he later, when, a few months after that, he didn't talk to me for a while, and then he was visiting Southern California, so he reached out. He said he wasn't going to, but that he prayed on it, and he decided he should. And in that conversation, he told me that he loved me less.
Raw with Rasha will be back in a moment.
Okay, when somebody tells you that, your parent just tells you, I love you less. What is going on through your head? Are you then starting to question your worth and your identity at that point?
It was kind of maddening because you just think your parents are supposed to love you unconditionally. And if you're not going to be loved unconditionally, then why'd you bring me into this world in the first place? So kind of anger around that, and I tried to rationalize it like, this makes me happy. And if you're okay with it, everyone else in your life will be okay with it. But there's no, rationalization around this. It's just years of ignorance, kind of, it's not like he understood. It's not like he had ever met any queer person. And so looking at it from a compassionate lens, I can see why it was scary for him. And he was worried about what everyone else would think, right? The South Asian sort of like...
Yes. Well, we have to touch upon that. The log kya kahenge. What are people going to say? And it's more about what are people going to say about our family, because my daughter is queer and this is not part of the norm.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Yeah, I really feel like I've seen other instances where like the parents totally fine, and so no one else can say anything. They may whisper behind their back, but if you're okay with it, then what does it really matter what everyone else thinks about you, And we have a small like community in Seattle. So I understand it's like everyone knows each other's business. I mean, I hadn't lived there for a really long time, and I'm sure he hasn't even told people that he's friends with there about me.
Even now?
Yeah, even now, I'm sure. And it was so interesting because I had a friend I grew up with who's also part of the LGBTQ community, who's also Ismaili, and they're close, like, that my friend's dad and my dad are really good friends. So I offered that as a resource for my dad. Like, look, there's someone within the community who's already had to deal with this. And he couldn't even talk to that person.
Did you have any fears before coming out? I mean, now especially with what, how it translated with Dad.
Yeah, I mean, you think perhaps I'll never be a part of this family again. I'll lose my support system. At that time I was in law school, and I, wasn't necessarily supporting myself fully. He was helping me a little bit. And so all of that stuff, economic insecurity and just, yeah, feeling like that loss of love. And then that affects other relationships, right? Even if his brothers are okay with it, they were kind of scared of him, and so they weren't sure how to engage with me. I mean, they were really great. Like, my uncle called me and said, no matter what, you'll always be my daughter. So that was so great, but it still could fracture lots of things within a family, so it is really, really scary.
Have the dynamics changed? I mean, years out now, are things a little better? Are they worse?
They're definitely better, thankfully. I heard a statistic that said that it can take parents on average between 7 and 10 years to accept after their child comes out.
Wow.
And so he's right in that average. So it's about 7 years of just sort of dancing around the topic. At one point I lived with a partner, and he, I wouldn't really tell him he hadn't met her. And then, yeah, about 7 years later, he just, I don't know, all of a sudden was okay. And to this day, he's not fully okay. He still calls my partner my friend, but he knows we're together, and the three of us hang out all the time, and he really likes her, and they get along really well. And I always tell her she's so similar to him, which is terrifying to me. But yeah, so it has changed, and it feels much better, but there's still always these little things where you wonder. It's never that we talked about it after the fact either, right? It was just sort of like swept under the rug, and now it's okay.
And how are you handling things when they're harder?
I have such an amazing community, like queer community, folks I can talk to, my partner. I feel very lucky and privileged that, I'm out everywhere. Even if I have to affirmatively say it, I'm not afraid to do that. It's sort of annoying that I have to affirmatively always tell people, or they're going to ask me if I have a boyfriend or a husband, right? And so I like to preempt that, so it's not an awkward conversation. So that kind of stuff is annoying.
How do you preempt it?
Normally I'll just drop in a little like, oh yeah, my partner, she does the same thing, or she also likes this thing, and throw in the gender pronoun so that it's very clear who my partner is.
This is where I stand.
Yes.
Did you feel different prior to 21? I mean, were you dating men, or did you know when you were in junior high or high school?
No, I feel like this is pretty different from a lot of queer folks that I talk to. Like, I never really thought about it. I was a nerd, so I didn't really date anybody in high school. Yeah. But I did have a boyfriend in high school at the very end, for a few months. And then in college, I, flirted around or whatever. But it was about a couple of years of just like feeling it out and figuring it out. But I didn't really have any inklings before that. It truly for me was like, oh, this is a way people can live, and this feels right to me.
More after this short break.
I'm sure you went through a lot of different emotions.
Yeah, it was a lot of, in some senses, insecurity, and just feeling that struggle of like, I just want to be me, and how can I be me and have these relationships with my family? Like, those two things are never going to come together. So it's a lot of hard feelings around that, just not knowing. I think it's like that uncertainty, right? Like I came out to my dad and now he doesn't accept it, and will it be that way forever, or will it be awkward forever?
Is there pain there at all with not the acceptance? Because I know that's so important to us, especially in South Asian families. Like, we want our families to accept our partners and just everything that we're doing.
Yeah, it's very painful. You know, I remember when he came down here and we talked after I came out through the letter, like, he was crying the whole time. And I was just, I think, a little bit in shock, you know, that this was happening and that I was having this conversation, and it was also out in public. So it was a hard conversation.
Oh, you guys were not at home?
No.
Where were you?
He was visiting, I don't know, he was in San Diego, and so we were just like sitting on a bench in a park, you know, with like other people around. And
Well, you're seeing this grown man cry.
Yeah.
Sharing his emotions. What's running through your mind at this point?
it was really profoundly sad, and that he couldn't accept me, and that he couldn't see past his own closed-mindedness to just see me for who I am, his daughter, someone he raised, you know. It was really sad.
His reaction did bother you a little.
Oh, a lot.
With the pain.
Yeah, it was awful. He didn't talk to me for about 3 months. After he read the letter, I called him like maybe a week later, and he hung up the phone on me. He didn't want to talk to me, and it was very painful and very, very worrisome that maybe this is how it's going to be forever.
And I'm asking you that so I can help other people. Like, how do you move past that? You know, this is a huge part of your life.
Yeah.
How do you move past that pain of not being accepted?
I don't know that it ever fully goes away. Like, even talking to you about it right now, I feel like very sad about that fact, you know?
It's okay.
Yeah. But I do think it's just been like all of the amazing people in my life who have kept me going. And I am so lucky to have so many family members that are supportive, that I just try to hold on to that, you know, that they, like, the fact that my grandmother has met my partner, and every time I talk to her, she asks about how my partner is doing, and we'll talk to her. And like, I never in my wildest dreams imagined that could happen. You know, she's 93 years old.
Right.
And I do think like there's probably ways in which my queerness and telling that story has opened up other possibilities for people in my family. You know, it may allow them to share more, to talk about what their true selves are, you know, necessarily sexual orientation, but just being more open and being more free and embracing who you are. So that's a lovely part of it, you know?
Absolutely. Does it get tiring?
Very, very, all the time, you know. I think also it's not just about sexual orientation in the queer community, but it's also accepting different types of gender identity, gender performance, right? And so even if your family's okay with it, but they really adhere to these gender norms, and my partner is gender nonconforming, you know, then you feel constantly like these little microaggressions, I guess you would call them, you know, people saying, oh, girls wear pink, or girls wear dresses. And it's like, not in my world, you know,
Right.
That's not the case. And so that part is tiring. You don't want to have to constantly have to educate people. I wish people would just go read things themselves.
What do you think has opened up for you after you've come out?
You know, I think being a part of the queer community is just very freeing. You know, there's freedom around how you express your sexuality, body positivity, embracing all aspects of yourself. You know, I feel like I've been able to like embrace my whole self, you know, at all times. And I think that's been really amazing. And then there is like shared identity, you know, in the community. And so having queer friends, finding queer community has been like the absolute best thing ever. Through Satrang, finding, you know, queer family, basically, you know, and really like redefining what I think of as my family. So my friends are my family. They're my entire support system. And that is a beautiful thing that not everybody gets to have.
You took the risk, you stood up for who you were and told your parents, especially your dad. Some people don't even get that opportunity. So in looking back, was it all worth it?
Yeah, it definitely was worth it for me. I'm not a person who would say that everybody has to come out, that it's something that you have to do. It's a really personal decision. I'm grateful and privileged that my dad has come around and that I still have a relationship with him. That's not true for everybody who does this. And it's just a really personal decision. But I know from the people in my life, at least, who have told their parents and whose parents haven't really come around, that they wouldn't have it any other way, that they made the decision they did because they had to embrace who they were fully, that they took a chance on their parents, hoping that they would understand and that they would provide them with that unconditional love, but that they were going to choose to love themselves first. And part of that meant telling their parents. Again, it's not for everybody. Right. And there's lots of people who don't come out and live far from their parents and are able to do it, or live with their parents and don't come out, and that's their choice. So I wouldn't say everyone has to do things one way, but for me, it's turned out well, thankfully. And even if it hadn't, I don't think I would do it any other way.
What about conservative families with parents who say, well, why can't you just marry a man? Like, I mean, I've spoken to people who've even said, parents have said, just live a double life, which I can't even imagine. But how do you react to something like that?
When I came out to my dad, that was some of the other relatives' sort of thought process, or like, why do you only have gay friends? Why is that? And everyone who's in your life. And, I think that can be really torturous, right? If you're married to someone you don't want to be married to, regardless of gender. And that happens a lot in our community too, right? A lot of people stay in marriages for fear of shame or whatnot, the shame it might bring to your family. And so it's, again, just sort of a general thing that needs to change, is like, you can't tell me who to marry, when to marry them, how to marry them, you can't tell me to get married. Maybe I don't want to get married. Maybe I just want to live with this person for the rest of my life, or have multiple partners for the rest of my life, right? So I just think people's minds need to open to really expanding what's possible for our lives.
If there's someone out there right now who wants to come out to their family, is just finding a way to do so, what would your advice be to them?
Yeah, I would say if you have the privilege to think through it, sometimes you don't, and sometimes somebody outs you, but if you have the privilege to think about how you're going to do it, I would just really consult with people in your life, think about how to do it that feels right to you, that honors your truth and that honors who you are, and then create a plan for safety and support after you do it, so.
How do you create that plan, though? How do you know what to do?
Yeah, so I think it's tapping into, I don't know if stuff is available now on the internet. I know when I was coming out, there wasn't any sort of how to come out to your parents guide, but I think there are resources like that now, or just talking to other people, if you hopefully know other people who have come out, and hear from them what their experience was like. Talk to anybody in your life who's supportive to try to help you figure that out. It could happen in a number of ways. It could happen in person to come out. It could happen through a letter, an email, a phone call, so many different ways. And so just really thinking about what feels right and safe.
Well, Alicia, I'm going to say that you sharing your story definitely will perhaps help open the doors for people watching out there. I think this is a very important topic. I know it can be controversial in some families, but it's a discussion that we have to have.
Absolutely. And thanks for opening up the conversation.
Oh, thank you for being here. It's just been such a pleasure getting to know you and hearing about your journey. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for watching us on Raw with Rasha.